Hi, welcome to Addiction Recovery Place podcast, the podcast champion addiction treatment professionals around the world. I'm your host, Chris Langley, and I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest, Gary Gatz. Gary is the Director of Intimacy Recovery, which is located in New York, but serves many states across the country. Gary is a certified sex addiction therapist and a certified partner trauma therapist. Thank you very much for joining me today, Gary. It's so great to have you with us.
My pleasure. I'm really glad to be here, Chris. Thank you.
I really appreciate your time. And obviously, you're very busy, Gary. So we're just going to jump straight into the first question. So can you tell us about yourself and your journey to becoming the Director of Intimacy Recovery?
Sure. 100%. That's what I tell you about myself. It's always the hardest question, I think. It's much easier to say what someone does than who they are. This is a second career for me. I was in education for many years, for probably almost as long, 20 years first, and also working as a rabbi. It was while in that world, I was first was exposed to and started to personally struggle with addiction myself, and then got sober. And that journey of recovery led me to a lot of changes. I think that recovery, whether recovery meaning 12-step recovery or therapy, just as a broad term, recovery therapy, is really about learning to be the most authentic version of ourselves that we can, living in our own authenticity, our own integrity. And so it really required me to learn how to listen to myself and to not be running around living the life of fear of what was expected of me. And so that's not what I expected would happen when I got sober. I didn't think I would actually be able to get sober. I was like, this will never work for me. But so many things, as they say, like the gifts of recovery, so many things are that I wasn't even expecting kind of unfolded just by taking that first step to get help. And one of the places that led me to was after probably about, 7 years in recovery, wanting to change professions, realizing I didn't want to continue. I loved teaching for many years of my life. I probably knew more people under the age of 13 than above, than adults, because I was working with kids at summer camp, youth programs, private Jewish schools primarily. But it wasn't feeling as fulfilling. And I also felt that I wasn't equipped to really help the kids. I felt what I was teaching was meaningful to the students, but I saw students in class who were not able to learn like I knew they could, because I could see they had stuff going on internally, like emotions, like they brought them from home. And that felt very familiar to me, to my experience as a student in school, where things that were going on internally for me emotionally got in the way of being able to learn, because I just had too many feelings going on. I didn't know how to deal with them. So I didn't have the tools. I mean, I could provide care and, help a student feel seen, but I didn't have tools to help them. So eventually I went back to school. It was a second career, and got my master's in social work, and worked at a number of places until I started my own practice, which was terrifying. Again, it was not a career change was not the last thing I thought about when I thought maybe I'll become a barista when I got sober. Like, maybe that's my future. I had lost a job as a result of my addictions and just didn't see much of a future. But I was terrified to go back to school. I didn't feel very smart. I didn't know how I'd fit it in with working full time, having my two kids living with me full time. But I just started with the first step of, I actually was talking about this with someone today, of the first day I applied online, I just filled out my name and my address, and that was it. I was too intimidated by the process. It felt so overwhelming. I have to get letters of recommendation. I have to write an essay. Like, anyway, it was like one of the best things I've ever done. And eventually started this practice. The pleasure of working in this field feels so meaningful. It's like a whole new lease on life. The ability to sit with people as they come in with where they're at and whatever they're dealing with individually, as a couple, groups. And also I found ways, I missed teaching after a number of years. So I found ways to find opportunities to teach by hiring staff and developing. As the practice grew, I got to get my fix, so to speak, of teaching by training new staff, which is a big part of our practice also.
So when did you start your program, Intimacy?
I think I'm really not good with time frames. I can remember everything about your family that you tell me and your feelings, but your time frames I'm not good with. I would say I think it's 2012 it started. Yeah, I think so.
And when did you go back to school?
That's how I figure it out. Like I think I graduated in 2009. I'm probably off a year, maybe 2010. So I either started at like 2012, 13-ish, maybe 14 even. I'm not, I'm sure it's documented, right? Like there's legal forms I had to fill out, but this and song lyrics, they don't stay in my mind. Like I can't even sing my favorite Bruce Springsteen song on demand. I don't know if I hear it, I can sing along. So it's about, I would say somewhere between 2012 and 2014.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's one heck of a journey you've just described, and certainly the right career for you, without a doubt. And I'm really excited for you to tell our audience about some of the services you offer, because this is quite a unique podcast for me as well. And I'm really interested to find out about some of the service that you offer.
Sure. Yeah, like when I opened my practice, I threw a lot of stuff against the wall to see what would stick. I thought I would be really interested in working with substance abuse because I had a personal recovery background in that. I thought I'd want to work with kids because I had worked with them for 20 years. I thought I also worked like with older adults for about 9 years. I taught senior citizens. I ran a summer camp for senior citizens. So I just had all these different niches, and I had worked with sex addiction. And had also interned and worked at a practice center. So I've tried all these different things plus others, and this is the one that really stuck. And I didn't really want it to be just sex addiction because it felt to me that even that was too narrow of a lens. And really, like the lens through all the work we do at the practice is really about intimacy. It's in the name, Center for Intimacy. And what I mean by intimacy is the ability for someone to be intimate with themselves, and only then after that being able to be intimate with others. So meaning like we have so many different parts of ourselves. We have the parts we really like about ourselves, that parts we might put on social media that look really great to the world. Those parts we're in touch with. But we also all have parts that we don't feel good about ourselves, or that we don't even want to know because it's, like in internal family systems, they're called exile. Like it's a part of ourselves that we like, I can't even maybe even know it's there. It's too painful. Or I know it's there, but I don't like to really interact with it. Like, I don't know, like pettiness, maybe the fact that I get jealous at someone else's success, or someone else gets invited to a party and I don't, but I don't like that about myself. So I don't want to acknowledge that. Or anger, or for some people, addiction, or the pain of vulnerability. All these parts that are uncomfortable, or the feelings of I'm not enough or I'm broken. So in order to really be an authentically whole person, I have to be aware of all of my parts that I'm ignoring, usually going to come back out sideways in a destructive way often. So intimacy for me with myself means I'm aware of these different parts, even when they're hard to look at. And if I'm only going to let you see them if I'm willing to look at them. Because if I don't have the ability or the tolerance for the pain to see these parts of myself that I don't feel good about, I'll hide them from you because I think you're going to judge me too. So it's helping people really know themselves and then with the right people, having the trust and safety to share that. So we also look at a lot of ways and strategies that people develop to avoid that intimacy with themselves, because it's really scary. Like, our hearts are very fragile and they're tender, and all of us have some kind of relational experience as children, whether at home or at school or something else, creates these little wounds or cuts or nicks in our heart. And so we all find ways to try to avoid that pain, which is a really healthy response. And for some people, being the best student is a response to that pain. If I'm really good, if I'm the good son, the good daughter, the good student, the best athlete, the funniest in class, the best in show, people are going to like me, and then I'm not going to feel that pain. And then they'll want to be my friend, or they'll want to date me, or they'll want to marry me, or they'll want to hire me. So I get worth from that. For other people, a way to not deal with that pain is to maybe shut down, dissociate, maybe depression, maybe numb out through substances, through food, through sex, through getting validation that, oh, you think I'm attractive? I feel good again, through work. So there's all these ways that we can numb out or disconnect from ourselves, and we all develop so many strategies around them. So helping people to understand those strategies, and many of the strategies are very helpful in some areas and unhelpful in others, right? So one of the primary areas of our practice is working with sex addiction, where people are using sex, either the act or the pursuit of it or the romance of it, or the feeling of desire, the feeling of validation, to either numb out or feel better about themselves, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's so many reasons for sex, from procreation to pleasure to passing time, I guess, for connection, for love. But when it becomes problematic, right? Like, either when it's causing me to live outside my value system, or when I'm hurting other people, by maybe keeping secrets or having secrets or living a secret sexual life. So we deal with a lot of that. A lot of that, like much addiction, I know, and probably your listeners know too, after all these episodes that you've created, that much of addiction is really a response to something else, right? Like, I'm going to drink or drug or act out sexually or eat or not eat, or shop or work in a way to either numb out or to get high, to feel really good. One of those, like an upper or a downer, one of the, there's two directions basically. So there's nothing wrong with seeking sex and all these things, but when it starts to cost me things, whether external things like a job, maybe I did something inappropriate at work, or maybe high risk behavior illegally, or maybe it cost me a relationship because I'm in a relationship, but I'm doing something else and that cost me the relationship, or my respect of my children. If I did something in my relationship and hurt their mother, or, modeled not what I want for my children to see, or my partner, who trusts and identifies that we have a exclusive mutual monogamous relationship, and I'm lying to that person. So then it becomes problematic. That's where we look at, is it problematic? And, or if I'm internally feeling problematic, like I don't feel good, like sex should feel good. Relationships mostly should feel good. None of them feel good all the time because it's human nature and we clash, but overall they should provide safety and comfort and pleasure and care and nurturance and all these things we all want and need. And when I'm feeling shame or I'm feeling bad about myself, I want to understand why. So that's like an internal reason that someone would come in. So we will help people look at those. And as I said, like, there's just symptoms like alcohol, drugs, sexual behaviors, all these compulsive or addictive patterns are really symptoms of something else. They're usually, there's the line I love, which was, what was the solution became the problem. Meaning, like, for many people, drinking or sex in this case was a solution to something else. I don't feel okay in my own skin. I have social anxiety. I'm going to have a drink to feel better. Or I'm going to like be flirty, or I'm going to get it. I feel a little about myself. So I'm going to make someone like me. And now I feel okay about myself. So they started as a solution to another problem, like a way to regulate, but then they take on their own life and become a problem in itself. So we really look at that in a non-shame based lens with nothing negative about sex. We try to actually help people to learn how to have a healthy relationship with themselves, with sex, and with others. And we also work on the other side of a relationship. If someone has been in a relationship with someone who's been doing some of these secret sexual behaviors, on the impact on their partner or family members. So, it's traumatic. Like if you think that your partner and you are living one reality, and then you discover that they have a whole different secret relationship or life or series of relationships or secret sexual life, it's a traumatic experience to find out that information. And so in the 90s, a woman named Jennifer Freud wrote a book called Betrayal Trauma. And she was talking about betrayal from a parent to a child. The impact when a parent doesn't provide what a child needs is so impactful on that child, because a parent-child co-regulate, like the parent co-regulates the child. They're their attachment object. That's how you develop your sense of worth. And so she really started talking about betrayal trauma around parent-child relationships. And over the last, 30 something years, as our understanding of attachment has grown, and that we understand like, oh, the way I experienced attachment as a child of my caregiver is now how I show up as an adult in my relationships. As that understanding has grown, we've started to understand that after our caregiving relationships as a child from a parent, the next closest relationship that mimics that is our significant other. They regulate our nervous system, right? Like you walk in from a rough day at the office out in the world and your partner gives you a hug. It's like, it just relaxes you. Like I'm home, I'm with you. And so that co-regulation between two people is so powerful. So when one of them betrays the other, it's so dysregulating to the other person. It's a traumatic impact, and it creates a lack of trust of their spouse, but it also or partner, but it also creates a lack of trust of themselves. Like, how did I not know? How did I not catch this? What's wrong with me? It also makes them doubt their own reality. Like if I thought all these things were one thing, but now I'm discovering that this whole time you've been in touch with him or with her or them, doing these things, and I didn't even know what was going on around me. It's very destabilizing for that partner. So we work a lot with what we call betrayed partners about that also.
Goodness me.
And then if I can just add, we also work on, we also do other, I would say standard sex therapy issues, things that individuals or couples struggle with around sex that are not about secrets or betrayal, but like function, whether it's erectile issues, vaginismus, different levels of desire, one person wanting sex more or less than their partner, or it's not working, other things are not working well. We deal with all of that.
Sounds very highly complex, but much, much needed. Gary, you're the first person I've had on this podcast who's a sex therapist. I'm finding the conversation already so fascinating with what you've just said.
I can't believe I'm the first person, because here's the thing, right? You're mostly having on substance abuse, right? I think, aren't you? 40% of all, I don't know where I read this years ago, but 40% of people struggling with substance abuse have an unhealthy relationship with sex. And like every substance abuse treatment program, I think really, everyone's either having or had sex, or they're gonna have sex. It's an integral part of who we're all sexual human beings, I don't just mean being actively having sex, but it's part of who our essence is. So when they're talking in recovery about the allergy of the body, like your physical recovery, your spiritual, your emotional recovery, like what about your sexual recovery? Because they're all having it, especially programs for young adults. I remember speaking to a group of young adults who are in substance abuse recovery, and they're like amazing that they're doing it, but like they're all thinking about sex. They're all either having sex. It's the thing that trips most people up for relapse too around substances. Like it has to get talked about. And most people have some sense of shame, even if they're not having a compulsion, but many people have shame around sex. I think it's why it's not talked about probably in many treatment or therapy things.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes complete sense to me. Thank you so much for explaining that to us, Gary. I'd just like to ask you about your team, because we spoke before and I've looked on your website. You have a very extensive team of experts you have. Can you just tell us about some of the members of your team you have at Intimacy Recovery?
Yeah. I love our staff. They're just wonderful. They're so diverse. They're so smart. They have such different backgrounds and trainings. And as the practice was first just me. And then as time, I realized like, I can't do all this. So I hired a few people and the pandemic hit. And from one of the places where I was trained, I learned that like having really good training is so essential for the development of a therapist. So we have 3 hours of supervision a week. Every staff person is in 3 hours, 2 hours of group supervision and 1 hour of individual supervision. So they're getting support, whether they are a recent graduate or they've been in the field for 15 years. We all still need to learn. I need to learn. And so in the pandemic, it was like really meaningful. Every week we would meet virtually. And, it's hard to remember because it was only 5 years ago, but it was really scary. Especially we're in New York, which was one of the first places really hit hard in America. Where I lived in New York City, I would hear sirens all the time. Like there were people dying all around. You could see from my window ambulances on the highway across the over in Brooklyn from where we were living. It was really a scary time, and we were all stuck at home, not knowing what's going to happen. So the weekly group supervision meetings that we had felt so important, like just for connection. And we were having need for more therapists, but I didn't want to. After we got to like staff of about 6, I just felt like what am I supposed to do? Keep hiring and just making it bigger and bigger? Like it didn't feel right to dilute the intimacy. So that's the name of the practice of the staff. Also, they really had a special bond. So I decided to hire an entire parallel staff and have 2 separate staffs. I mean, they're allowed to mix, but like run them as separate tracks so that they could each have a team that they felt closer with. Instead of having, let's say, 20 people in one meeting, which is like a lot on a computer, people get lost. How often are they going to talk? We had like 5 in each or 10 in each eventually, where they're able to have a better, more intimate training experience. So, and then we have a wonderful clinical director, Nancy Tricamo. She's been in the field for over 30 years. She's taught at NYU. She's worked at really wonderful places. And, this practice would not exist without her. She supervises people, the staff, for their individual supervision. It's very rare I hired her when I realized I couldn't do it all. To have someone come in and be liked by all the staff, either they're giving out candy to everybody or they're just a really good person. And she really is such a wonderful, caring supervisor that does such an amazing job in training staff. And so part of the whole feel of our practice is I want it to be kind of like similar to a teaching hospital, where they're really geared towards teaching new doctors to become better. And like we constantly have trainings every month. I encourage people to continue to be lifelong learners because there's no therapist that knows it all. I haven't found that person yet. I found people that think they know it all, but there's no therapist who knows it all. And there's so much to learn just to be able to give someone more and more tools to be able to help people heal.
Yeah. Yes. Supervision is the cornerstone of therapy, I think, to get support from each other. It's a very powerful thing to have, but it's so much needed, but often forgotten, I think.
I agree. I was at a dinner Monday night here in New York City that we organized for a bunch of therapists to create community, which is important. And we were discussing between the different practices that all of us are at, what is supervision like? And, I took a lot of pride for how our practice does it, where we create an environment where people are asking the rest of the staff, like, I'm struggling with this. They feel comfortable to say, I don't know what to do with this client. I want to help them. Here's where I feel stuck. Okay. And there's so much brain power, and I would say heart power in the room. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for explaining that. And it seems like you've got a very solid team.
Yeah, we have thanks, Chris. We have we have two different types of 2-week intensives. Um one is specific for like sexual addiction, and the other one is more specific to trauma. They have some overlap because all of them look at trauma. They both look at trauma. But I we got from time to time clients who come in crisis. Around sexual addiction, it might be they just got discovered by their partner, and they finally are like are compelled to like give it up and to like get help. um and they might be in various stages of denial still about that, or completely ready to do the work, or someone's just in real crisis based on their trauma history. And you know, the traditional model of coming for 50 minutes a week for therapy once a week, it would take them close to a year to get 40 to 50 hours of therapy. So part of the idea of the intensive is like in a short period of time, you can they can create a really strong foundation and accelerate your healing process by diving in deep and giving yourself a really strong cornerstone and foundation. So as we saw the need, we started to create this. And the one thing I didn't want to spend time doing was like stressing about, will we have enough people or not? Like, I don't want to be in the counting beds or counting how many people are signed up business, because that's just stressful, and you never can know when people are going to need the help. So we created a personalized intensive, like many intensive programs. If you go to, whether online or in person, they're 95% group therapy. You're in this group, you're in that group. Ours are the exact opposite. And then maybe the average one, you go to have individual therapy once or twice a week, maybe. Ours are the opposite. They're 95, actually 98% individual one-on-one therapy with your own therapist, and then group once a week. We used to run them in person before the pandemic. Since the pandemic, and still we're still doing them virtually, although I think we're going to move in this year back to doing them in person too. So basically on virtual, you can't have someone on camera for 8 hours a day. They will go, it's doing real emotional work. It's, if anyone's working virtually 8 hours a day, they're checked out at some point, including myself. It's just not possible. It's exhausting. So it's about 4 to 5 hours per day. And we cover a range of things from family of origin issues, trauma history, relationship and attachment timeline, and then building it out, whether it's based on trauma or sexual addiction, like creating here's what we're identifying. And you have the same therapist for 2 hours a day, and then you have 1 or 2 other individual therapists as well for different supplements. We look at like what's this person's relationship to shame? How do they respond when they feel shame? Because people respond to shame differently. Some criticize others to feel bigger and better. Others attack themselves. Some just withdraw. We look at something that you've mentioned to me before, which is like codependency, and stuff like that. So we're looking at a whole bunch of things and then building out a strategy and a plan for what's going to happen when this is over and moving forward. How are you going to incorporate all these lessons and integrate them into your regular daily life?
Yeah, we just mentioned codependency there, Gary. Can you tell us about how this can have such an impact on someone who's experienced an addiction? It's fascinating because I've had other specialists on who describe codependency, and it's just, I love the subject.
I think it gets
fascinating for me as well.
Yeah, there's a certain world nowadays where it gets a bad rap. I think it gets distorted. I I had a supervisor Chris Samuels, she used to say, if you scratch an addict, like on a scratch off card, you'll find a codependent underneath, right? Codependency is the abandonment of self. That's really what it is. So addiction is also a form of self-abandonment, even though it's self-indulgent, of course. Like, I'm not giving you the drugs, I'm taking the drugs. I'm acting out sexually. I'm eating. It's all for myself. But it's a form of self-abandonment. I'm not doing what's healthiest for me. So they have a very similar thing. And yeah, my experience has been anyone struggling with some addictive behavior has that. And it's so much more nuanced, right? Like substance abuse and alcohol abuse isn't, I mean, yes, there's nuances, of course, but it's like you're either using it or you're not in some form. It's not, it's like, it's fairly black or white. So if you know, if like, are you sober or you're not sober? Food and sex, more challenging to define. How do you define sobriety with food or sex? Because you need them to live. So it's more about developing a healthy relationship to food or a healthy relationship to sex, you know? So codependency, like, how do you define healthy or unhealthy? It's so subtle. Or I can say to you, what movie should we go to, Chris? And you're like, I want to go see Paddington in Peru. And I'm like, sure, no problem. And it could be, well, I'm saying, sure, no problem, because I'm scared that you won't like me if I tell you I already saw Paddington in Peru. I was at the opening night for Paddington in Peru. And I want to go see, I don't know what else is out in the movie. But like, I don't want to see it, but I'm scared maybe you won't like me. So I abandon what I really want to do in myself to make you like me by agreeing with you. But I could also say, sure, no problem, Chris, I'll go see that movie because I like you and it's my first choice. But maybe last time we went to the movie I wanted to go see, so I'm being a good friend and be like, no problem, because I'm compromising, right? So it's so subtle. Yeah. The same words or action, it really depends on what's happening internally for me. So the codependency recovery is typically a much more subtle thing than substance abuse or sex or food, because I have to really be aware of what's going on internally to know I'm doing something. And it's really impactful to people when they're in a relationship, because, you know, in a romantic partnership or relationship, there's negotiation going on all the time. I don't mean like transactional negotiation, but if your partner says, where do you want to go for dinner? I want to go for Chinese. I want to go for Italian. How do we decide? Sometimes we fight it out and don't go out and just eat leftovers. Sometimes we say, all right, I'll go to Italian. All right, I'll go to Chinese. But what's motivating those things? Is it compromise? I love you. I know you're in the mood for that. Let's go do what you want. And with a full heart. Yeah. Or is it like, I never get my way. She doesn't, like, she controls me. She's my boss. And so it's really subtle, and a person has to really get honest with and have self-awareness about what they're doing. So it also means I have to know what's true. I have to be in touch with myself at all times. What are my true feelings about this? And that's hard for people who are used to abandoning themselves. Typically, people deal with this issue. Like, the first stop is substance abuse and alcohol. Usually it's because it's also creating the biggest problems. Then it's sex and food / work, shopping, whatever, gambling, maybe, if that's an issue for some people. And then this codependency thing, it's been going on all the time, but that gets addressed later on. It's typically like a later recovery experience, in my experience.
You do amazing work with couples, Gary. You really do. But do you also help the partners one-to-one as well?
Yeah, we do individual therapy for people going through betrayal trauma, partners who've been betrayed. We also provide groups for them as well. Getting discovered by your spouse that you have, a secret sexual life is really embarrassing and shameful. And you're isolated, right? Like, who do you talk to? You're not going to talk to your buddies at work. You're not going to call your parents usually. So who do you talk to? So it's often very isolating, just like getting discovered about having a substance abuse addiction. So that person often gets put into treatment really fast, whether it's individual therapy, group therapy, 12-step recovery. They get support. But their spouse or their partner, they also often don't want to tell people. They just discover, let's say they discover their husband or wife has been having affairs for 30 years. or maybe struggling, it was like some other type of sexual acting out. It's not the kind of thing they're going to share at like carpool drop off with their friends or at work with their friends. Like they have their own level of shame about it. Plus, if they're not sure if they want to stay in the relationship or not, and they're considering staying, they're often scared to share it with support people in their life, like family members or friends, because they don't want to be judged for staying, because everyone thinks, oh, if you get cheated on, you should leave until you're in that spot. And also, they don't want to burn the bridge. Like, so they may not tell their family, because if they're thinking I'm going to stay with him or stay with her, and I tell my family, they're going to hate my spouse, and that's not going to be good. So they get isolated. So it's so important. I appreciate your question, Chris, because it's so important that they get individual therapy. And we try, some are not ready for it or don't want it, but we really encourage them also to go into group therapy where they can have a place to talk about this thing, because it's like probably the biggest thing going on in their life at that moment. And when they go out to lunch with their friends and they can't even talk about it, they start to feel disconnected from family and friends because they have this huge secret, in a sense. I mean, privacy, but they feel like they're holding back the biggest thing in their life, so they're not even being authentic. It's very isolating and very shameful for them too. So 100%, we really encourage them to get individual therapy. Sometimes they don't want to. They're like, I didn't cause this. Why do I have to go to therapy? And they're 100% right. It's not fair. But we want to provide them support. That's really what I think. It's not like you didn't do anything wrong. We're not here to fix you. It's not your fault, but you're really hurting probably. And maybe we can help you through this, probably one of the most painful points of your life.
It must be incredibly supportive for a partner to know that helps there, that they've got somewhere safe to offload their stress and anxiety and anger.
Yeah.
And it must be quite empowering for someone to have someone as supportive of you and the members of your team to talk them through the process. It's a very different dynamic as well, I think.
Yeah, look, when I got trained, it wasn't this way. It's changed in the last 15 years or so. I mean, that's earlier when I said that I think codependency gets a negative connotation in some areas, some places today. It's because of this type of thing, meaning like in the substance abuse world, you might have a alcoholic or a person with drug addiction struggling, and their family members are told, like, what are you doing that's enabling their behavior? You're being codependent, right? It's almost a level of blame sometimes. How do you say to let's say a woman whose husband has been cheating on her for 30 years, what did you do what is it about you that attracted you to that kind of person? It's not going to, it's re-traumatizing them. But that's how I was trained, that you help, just like you might say to a spouse of someone with substance abuse, like, what is it about you that was attracted to this kind of person? The same thing here. So initially, that's how people were trained, is to help make the partners look at, like, what's their part? And they're like, what are you, nuts? Like, it was re-traumatizing in therapy. And a number of people about 15 years ago really developed the idea I described earlier of betrayal trauma, and a better understanding of it, and realizing, like, you're traumatizing the victim by laying blame at their feet. So that's why some people, I think, misuse the term codependency to, like, create blame, whether for a spouse or a family member of a substance abuse person, or a spouse of a person with acting out sexually, because it's not their fault. They didn't know. Sometimes maybe they had clues, but they had what I would call, like, betrayal blindness. Like, the information was too overwhelming and painful to acknowledge to themselves. So they hid from it, like, because it's just too much. Like, your whole life's about to fall apart if, like, this is all false. But eventually the information becomes overwhelming. But I would never, ever, it's one of the things that we talk about in their healing, is like, they didn't cause this. Like, if somebody has a pervasive history of doing this, which is part of what often comes out, this wasn't because one night you wanted them to do the dishes, or because you didn't have enough sex, or because you put on 10 pounds after your kids. Like, that's not why they're doing this. This isn't it. Of course, it feels profoundly personal to women, and it is. It's a feeling of like, why didn't you choose me? Why wasn't I enough? That's what they all feel. It's so profoundly personal. But we really want to make sure that we really want to help them to not blame themselves, because it's not their fault.
That's incredible, and it's so good to hear that you're providing service to family members as well. I say this a lot on the podcast, that families are sometimes left out of the process, and they're the glue.
Yeah, and also for aftercare, like just the whole thing, like someone goes back into a family system, we need to help the family in its entirety, to help the one person, but both the cause and the solution.
Absolutely. And one last thing I'd like to ask you about your service, Gary, that you help those who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. So how does PTSD pose such a risk to someone who's towards an addiction?
It's a great question. Well, I think one answer is what I said earlier, that line. It's from one of the 12-step books around sex addiction, which is, what was the problem becomes a solution. It was the solution becomes the problem. So what was the original problem? It's sometimes PTSD or trauma. So then an addiction is sometimes the solution to that. If I don't know how to sit with this pain, I'm going to distract myself. So a high school kid who's got, let's say, really rough things going on at home and just feels so broken and less than, and their friends are out having beer in the parking lot from behind the trees at school, and it's fun, and wow, and they do it, it feels good, right? I'm going to go back again because it's where I feel more comfortable. And then again, or let's say smoking or whatever, or eventually drugs. And the same with sex. If a teenage boy is doing or girl is exploring their body and let's say masturbating, which is a healthy thing to do for people, for kids, and it's soothing and comforting. Then next time that they might do it again and feel like, wow, that feels really good. And then it starts to get associated sometimes with soothing and comforting. And so then kind of like if somebody smokes a cigarette whenever they get upset, eventually their brain says, oh, I'm upset, have a cigarette, I'll feel better. So the same thing, it can be with food or with anything, right? We do it like comfort food, similar thing. So it evolves sometimes. It starts out as a strategy that's adaptive to whatever is going on traumatically for them. And then it results in becoming maladaptive. It permutates into something maladaptive. And for a lot of people, PTSD symptoms, we think of trauma or impact on people, especially on children, as a event, right? Like something terrible that happened, an assault, physical assault, sexual assault, an accident, car accident, war. But I actually heard just last night a study released from the National Department of Health about children who were maltreated. 70% of them, the maltreatment was neglect. And 26%, the other, just doing the math quickly, 26% was actual abuse. So a lot of PTSD or a lot of traumatic symptoms, and I think the majority probably that come into many offices are not where the kids were beaten horrifically or sexually abused. That happens, and those happen, and they happen too much, of course. But the majority of it is what we call relational trauma. That comes from the lack of being cared for the way they needed to. Sometimes in like basics like housing, shelter, food, nourishment, not having those regularly, but more so from not having the things that every child needs, like comfort, care, nurturance, presence, things like that. Presence meaning being present, not giving a present. So the lack of that, children internalize like, why doesn't my parent want to hang out with me, or why are they on their phone all the time? Must because I'm not lovable. They're developmentally, children are self-centered. Their world revolves around them from a baby, where it actually revolves around them. As they get older and as we mature, we learn to like, no, it doesn't revolve all around me. That's part of human development. But when things happen to us when we're children, it's normal to think of that as like, it's my fault. So often, that's how children often develop like a low self-esteem or some kind of internal messaging of like shame, or I'm broken, I'm not good enough, because they've internalized something that's going on around them as being a result of like their fault. Like parents get divorced, the kid thinks they caused it. Like, they didn't cause almost never. It's the kids, right? But it's a normal child's reaction. So adaptive behaviors, if they're done too much, can become maladaptive. And that's really where, like, the work that we do, like any addiction work, often is going to hopefully end up going down to trauma, especially relational trauma.
I'd just like to ask you one last question about your service, Gary. So how do you receive referrals? How does someone find you?
The easiest way to find us is to listen to your podcast. The easiest way to find us is on the internet, I guess. You know, the name of the practice is Center for Intimacy. You can put that in the internet. You can also just type in intimacyrecovery.com. That's probably, and then on our website, there's plenty of ways to contact us. Another way to contact us, you can contact me directly, whether you're seeking therapy or you're a therapist and you want to discuss a case. I always want to, like, chat with other therapists. And if there's something I can help advise, like, on a case or consult, I love to do that. Or if you're thinking, as a potential client, I have an issue. What would be the best way to get treatment? I'm also happy, if not to work with you or have someone on my staff work with you, but to help just kind of give you a plan. Like, here's what I would do. Here's what I would suggest. Like, if you want to go deal with something. And so that people can reach out to me directly. My email is my name, Gary Katz, GaryKatz at intimacyrecovery.com.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you for that, Gary. I'd just like to ask you, we met through NADAC, which I've feel very blessed to have spoken to many, many amazing members, Gary, and obviously you're one of them. But can you tell me why you joined this organisation and what have been the benefits of becoming a member, and especially if you're newly qualified or training to enter the recovery sector?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. I joined for a couple of reasons. I always want to find community. I really value community, and I feel like it's available so less and less with all the wonders of technology, unfortunately, and the ability to create community through it, which they do, but they can also isolate, And so, like, I sit at home 3 days a week. I don't even go into an office. I'm more isolated, even though I'm connecting with you, but I'm not connecting with community. So one reason was wanting to have community, and then wanting to have a community of professionals who are really dedicated to helping people heal from addiction. And, like we joked earlier, probably the majority of them are dealing with substance abuse or alcoholism. But I guarantee that any therapist dealing with any type of substance abuse addiction or alcoholism, 30 to 50% of their caseload is dealing with something around sex. And so if I can help therapists feel more comfortable, because I get many clients who come to us and we're like, whether it's couples for couples therapy or individually, and they're like, we never talked about sex in our therapy. I'm like, when there's such, so I think one reason is many therapists don't feel comfortable talking about it. So if we can help therapists to be more comfortable and make it part of whatever the therapy is about, whether individually or like we talk about everything else in the person's life. That's another reason why I joined it, to try to help with a therapist too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing organization. It really is. As I said earlier, it's always a privilege to speak to dedicated members and professionals. It's been, it's quite humbling for me as well to do this. I really appreciate everyone to come and talk to me. A question I always ask is about stigma and how this is attached to having an addiction. Why do you think so many clients experience stigma before coming to your service or any service around addiction?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up.
It's a doozy.
Well, that's kind of what we were just talking about before, about even therapists, the stigma of talking about sex. I forgot her name. There's a woman in LA who about 3 years ago wrote a book on love addiction and sex addiction, and she was already sober from alcohol and drugs. And she said a line which I remember, which was, she said, like, in AA, in alcohol addiction recovery, we say that, like, AA is the last house on the block. And people feel a lot of shame about it, but, well, this is all you got. This is the last house on the block. She's like, in sex addiction recovery, it's like the shack behind the last house on the block. There's so much more shame. Like if you just think about, without addiction, alcohol, sex, and the amount of shame around each of those, or drugs and sex. There's so much shame in the world in general around sex for lots of reasons. So then when you get sex and like addiction, you've got a double shame thing. So it's an issue. Like people are, if you think like even in popular culture today, right? Like when you read about a celebrity who shares that they're sober from alcoholism or drug addiction, they're like, wow, they're kind of cool, even like look good for them. They got this edge, but they're also like aware of themselves now and reformed bad boy or whatever. When you hear someone's a sex addict, what do you think? Like, ew, perv, trench coat. That's the stigma right there. So right away, there's so much shame and about it.
Yeah. It's just such a shame in this day and age. We can't move past that word. It really is sad. But thank you very much for that, Gary. I ask all my guests this question because I get some very interesting and varied answers. But can you tell me your opinion of harm reduction and how it could play such a role in recovery from addiction?
That's a great question. It's a little different. I don't have a full answer. It's something I've thought a lot about and talk with friends about. I feel like there's a bit of a difference with substance abuse and alcoholism than sex. Because as I mentioned before, like the goal of sexual sobriety, let's call it that, is not to never have sex again, right? Most substance abuse recovery, that's the goal, right? Don't do the substance again. So harm reduction with substances means the person's going to drink or going to use, but let's do it in a way that can reduce the harm to them or to others. How do we at least somehow bring that down so they're not still creating as much harm to themselves or to others? And so in a certain way, that's exactly what we're trying to do through sexual recovery too. How do we have them a relationship with sex where it's not causing harm to them or to others? So I think that actually, in a certain way, it's all about harm reduction. But what I think you mean by the question is, how do you work with somebody who's not willing to give up their harmful sexual behaviors? I almost was able to dodge the question. How do you help them to give up the harmful sexual behaviors? Yeah, I think, if somebody, let's say, has a whole host of compulsive sexual behaviors, including having unprotected sex with people they don't know, right? There's a high risk for serious sexual transmitted diseases. That's a really big risk. So if they instead can masturbate, even compulsively, to me, that's a win because they're making themselves and other people, in case they're carrying STDs, safer. Of course, there's a concern, will it escalate back into that thing if they're still doing it? Do they have the ability to keep it at a reduced level that I would work with them at? But I would definitely want to have somebody find a way to still act out sexually in some form that's unhealthy to them, but is much less risky.
Yeah. Yep. That's just the answer I was looking for.
I
knew it was going to be a different answer to what I'm getting. It's wonderful. I wasn't sure whether I was going to ask this because obviously it's a very different kind of question to someone in your profession, but it was fascinating hearing that. Thank you so much for that. Last question, Gary. Do you have a message for anyone who's listening to this podcast who is going through an addiction?
Yeah. You don't have to be alone. Every type of addiction I know, whether it's sex or substance abuse or others, it feels so alone. Like people will not like me if they know me. That's the belief. And so it's like, it's not true. There are people who will like you and love you and care for you and support you while you heal and while you can change. And if you think that you're worse than everybody else, probably not true. I haven't met that person yet. I know I thought that. I actually thought at the same moment, I'm worse than all these other people in this room and I'll never get better. And at the same time, they're way worse than me. I'm so much better than them. Like that dual ego and inferiority piece. And so if you're feeling that you're broken and worse off, it's not true. It's true you feel that way. That can change. And if you can believe that it could change for me or for many other people, you don't have to believe it can change for you. But if it did change for us, it could probably change for you. And reach out, and I'm happy to talk more about that.
Well, Gary, it's been a real privilege and an honor to speak to you, and I'm very grateful for your time.
Same.
And I've found this last hour has just sped past. It's been absolutely fascinating to speak to you today, and I've really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank
Chris.
you for being part of this podcast. It's been great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.